up everybody, back again for another episode, and this time I want to talk to you about why you should never work as a software engineer in a startup. I know, there's a few things I want to talk to you about, and I'll explain this throughout the entire video of the next few minutes, and you'll understand why you should not work as a software engineer. Instead, what you should do to be extremely successful if you want to work in a startup. Before we jump onto this, I want to acknowledge my blue shirt. I know if you've seen the last video, I was wearing the same shirt. I do change my clothes. This is washed, but it's a new day, new life, everything. So let's start into it. What do I mean by you not wanting to work in a startup as a software engineer, and why you should not do that? Well, there's a couple of reasons. When I first heard this, I was quite confused with the entire concept as well. It didn't make sense to me, and I wasn't too sure what exactly this person was talking to was referring to me about when they mentioned, firing yourself as a software engineer. When you dig a little deeper into that, what we're essentially trying to cover through is 3 core points. What that comes down to is essentially the fact that if you work purely as a software engineer in a company, that's a very easy way for you to get fired. And when I say company, I mean a startup. Now, this video will not apply if you're working in a larger firm, you're very well funded, or you're working in a corporate environment. This definitely is not applicable over there. This is purely for when you're working in a startup that is either just pre-seed, seed, or not even funded yet and just trying to get their way through. So this doesn't apply for those sets of people. So what I'm trying to talk about is the uniqueness of your skill set, in that you're not doing just one thing, but you need to do multiple things. So if you're watching this video, you're working at a startup as a software engineer, do one thing: fire yourself right now. The way you can acknowledge by firing yourself is leave a comment below and smash the like button, because you know what? It helps the YouTube algorithm. Thank you, Graham Stevens. Now, moving ahead, let us talk about what I mean when I say you need to fire yourself from a startup. I'll start off with point number 1. Traditionally, what you end up seeing engineers doing, blog posts, articles, and just the utility of the internet is a lot of effort is put into engineering quality and engineering effectiveness. A lot of thought is not, unfortunately, put into the utility of the product to the customer. And as a startup, a large value proposition that you offer to the customer is how you're better than a larger corporate, right? And with most software engineers, what we end up seeing is a lot of the engineering capabilities are left sort of housed at the back door of the office versus the front facing, that's the product managers, designers, pretty much project managers. Everyone have access to customers, not as much as developers, though, because what the developers get is basically a tapered effect view of what the customer actually wants. And this affects the outcome of what we're trying to build, because in the end, developers are the ones that are trying to build the entire solution. That is a big issue. And when developers come from a larger environment to a smaller environment, they're used to a very utility-driven environment, i.e. I'm here to build a tool or build something and leave, right? That's my job. But in a startup, you need to be more and more customer-focused than ever before, because you are not going to be directly you're not going to have access to project managers or product managers or designers, not at the early stages of the startup at least. So you'll be the one doing pretty much most of it. You need to be the one sufficient enough to handle all these things. So if you work just as a software developer, it's not going to work well for you. I'll be deadbeat honest. You will not see yourself grow. You'll not see yourself climb up the ladder. As a software engineer in a startup, your role is much more significant and much more important. Not only are you just solving problems by building utility solutions to customers, but you're also managing the product. You're also doing a bit of thinking about the design. You're also responsible for customer acquisition. So the entire dialect as a developer, when you are working as a software engineer for a startup, changes, because it's not purely about code and what's the best way I can code, but it's you need to add on top of it, what is the best way I can code that will help my company reach its North Star metric, which is acquisition, retention, growth, reduced customer acquisition cost. They can be multiple things, right? And your job as a software engineer is to ensure you know exactly what you're doing to prevent yourself from just going down a hole of just building without actually knowing what you're building for. Now we've spoken about a bit of software engineering as a startup. Now I told you need to fire yourself, and you've hopefully commented below. If you haven't, do it now. Say I fired myself and I've hired myself again. You need to hire yourself again. Don't worry. You're not just firing yourself in this video. You're hiring yourself, but you're hiring yourself as what we call as product engineers. And there's a very stark difference. While you might say just a terminology, it's not. It's an entire mindset switch between going from a startup engineer to a product engineer. And there's a few stark differences and points that I want to mention over the next video and follow through to understand as to why product engineers are sustainable and most likely will kill it in startups, versus if you work as a developer in a startup, you'll most likely not survive, or you'll probably get fired sooner than later. Right, so what is one of the main difference of a product engineer versus a startup engineer? Well, one of the biggest ones is they have a get shit done attitude, and I really mean it. You might think engineers do, but product engineers come with a whole new level of steam and energy. And predicating to my previous point around how most engineering discussions on GitHub, Stack Overflow, or Reddit, or wherever, maybe Stack Overflow is because that's only for dev, but most of the other tools, if you look at Hacker News, it's all around utility of engineering, right? It's all about how the engineering principles work in tandem with everything else to do with code. Nothing to do with the actual development cycle. Sometimes as a software engineer in a startup, your job is not just to build code. Sometimes you'll be given a tough decision. You will be told to say that, okay, is this the right decision for me to make? Will it add tech debt? Is this tech debt sustainable? Will I be able to actually fix this tech debt down the road? What does this actually mean? And this get shit done attitude is irrespective of what the code outcome actually is, but they will build. I caught up with a friend of mine today morning, and he's doing just that. And he was talking about how some of the shortcuts he's taken over the past few months has sort of launched him into this position where he needs to fix all these issues. But it doesn't matter, because now they've hit a level of product market fit where they're acquiring customers. Now, you will see an array of engineers. If you're coming on a hiring perspective and you're watching this video, you'll see an array of engineers who really care about product, but they care about it on the engineering perspective. You need to find engineers who care about the product on the product perspective, i.e. they're excited about acquiring customers, they're excited about how the problem solves itself for the customer, not just here's this new React endpoint, or here's this new React component, or here's this new blah, or here's this. It's about how this will help convert customers, or how this will help achieve goals for our product with rapid iteration cycles, whatever it might be. So that get shit attitude is extremely important in an engineer in the early stages, because devs, as inherently passionate we are about engineering, what ends up happening is we often dig ourselves down rabbit holes of trying to solve problems. I do this almost all the time, and then I realize, okay, crap, I actually need to build something for the customer and build something for the end user, and these things don't matter. So that is one thing you need to be very cautious about as a software engineer working in a startup. If you get down this path of, I will just do something that solves a few problems, it won't help. You need to have that get shit done attitude, which means sometimes you need to do things that you are uncomfortable with for the greater good of their company. Right. Another thing product engineers often care about is that they are business first and then software second. And what I mean by that is these product engineers understand and realize that sometimes if they build great code but they don't build a solution that solves the problem for the customers, it doesn't matter, because the product doesn't launch. You've ever noticed the fact that good code is often is isolated to just good companies? And that's not a coincidence. It's not coincidence, because good code sometimes does not necessarily apply from the perspective of, hey, this does a mathematically magical solution. No, good code comes from good companies, because good code is defined by the fact that these people have done something that solves a problem for the customer, and they've done it in a way that is reflective in the code. And they've done this by usually hiring mini CTOs. And the best companies in the world, you can see, have hired mini CTOs because they have that cognitive mindset around business that helps them understand what they need to do to help achieve a certain problem, and solve a certain problem rather, not achieve it. And that is a very pivotal discussion that you need to have within yourself to understand that, are you a mini CTO, are you a tech lead, or are you just a software engineer? And there's nothing wrong with this. Again, none of this is just one is right and one is wrong. It's just purely discussive about whether this is the right thing for you to do in a startup or not to do in a startup. That's something for you to consider. Is everything that you do needs to be driven by business and business decisions, and the code sort of falls as a secondary. Whilst this sounds very harsh and hard for me to admit it as well, this is obviously situational based. If you are in the end a software that is built around software utility, then obviously code quality would be a lot more significant, maybe over customer acquisition. But most of the time, you're building code because you want to acquire customers or solve problems for customers. You're not building code because you want to build something beautiful that no one uses, right? So you need to be very cautious as a software engineer that whatever you're building for the utility of the customer, and you're not building for the utility of the developer. I'll correct myself there. You need to build things that are utility for engineering scale, but not for the sake of, this is great code, it looks awesome. right? So when you're doing something on an engineering perspective, when I'm making that business decision, that doesn't necessarily mean that you completely ignore code quality. What I mean by this is you can include code quality, but code quality can necessarily switch in what it means. Quality can move from being something that's scalable code, from code that can be easily understood as they're attracting more engineers. There's developer scalability and there's code scalability. There's multiple ways you can define what scale actually means. So that's what I mean by when I say when I'm talking about business decisions over software decisions. You need to understand where the business is going to next, and based upon that, you need to make software decisions that reflect upon it. And that is what a good product engineer does. They understand this is the direction that the business is taking, and based upon the direction that the business is going for, the engineer actually goes ahead and makes right decisions. An example I can give you is in a situation where we work out the fact that we need to acquire a set number of customers and our code is not equipped for us to do so. By understanding what the rules are for us to achieve this, we've suddenly gone ahead and figured out that a lot of the code that we built might not be appropriate for the direction we want to take. So the decision might be, okay, do we scrap the code that we built so far, or do we build on top of it? And what is the net advantage of us doing one over the other? Sometimes it might be uncomfortable for us as engineers to do code that we are not necessarily proud of, right? But in the end, remember, proud code does not build proud companies. Proud companies is built by proud code. And as weird and stupid and wrong as it sounds, all I'm trying to get to is you can build the best goddamn code in the world, but if that code does not solve a problem that acquires or solves problems for your customer and your business, that helps the needle move in your business, your code is as good as bad code. Because remember, it really doesn't matter. So the greatest code is the code that solves the greatest problems for what the business is facing. It really does not matter what you are trying to solve for if what you're trying to attract as an audience is not being attracted because no one's looking at your code. It's that whole combination of, quality is king, but traction is queen, so engagement is queen. So you need to have both. You need to have a combination of quality as well as the ability to attract customers, and that is where the business mindset comes in from. All right, the last part I want to talk to you about is essentially the fact that as a product engineer, customers come first, business comes second. So counter to my previous point. So, how previously I said business comes first, technology comes second. Yes, that is still valid and correct. But on the third point, customers come first, business comes second. You need to understand as a developer, you're a very special person. You have the ability to create things, right? That is so magical when you look at the power that you have as an engineer to take something from a concept of an idea and develop it into something that people can use and actually find value from. Your voice and opinion does matter. And if you're just a person who's a yes person within a startup who sits there saying yes, yes, yes to everything, it will take you a lot of time to get to where you want to. If you care about the customers just as much as the founder, if not more than the founder, that will make the most difference. You will have a very powerful stance in your business if you actually come into the company and say, look, I get this. This is a business decision. That's fine. But I'm telling you, for the customer, this is the right way to go. And these are the reasons why I think this is the right way to go as a customer, for the customer. And I have the ability to make this decision better than anyone else over here because I'm the one implementing that particular piece of code. So hear me out for a second. And you don't realize how important that factor and voice of yours is in the entire journey of building a product, because in the end, you get to decide what works and what doesn't work in terms of implementation. In the end, you get to decide what is the right path and not the right path. And if you end up going in a direction where business wants to do an X amount of things for you to attract a Y amount of customers, realize that if you attract a Y amount of customers who are not inherently happy with your product, nothing's going to happen. So you need to be that person who voices the fact that says, I am the one who's implementing, I am the creator, and because of me being the creator, I'm letting you know that this is not the right decision because the customer will not be happy. All our engineers at our company are extremely customer focused. They care more about the customer than most people, and everyone is design oriented. And I could not encourage you more as a software engineer and in an ecosystem right now where everyone's working at a startup to be more customer centric than ever, because everyone's becoming more and more business centric. So as a software engineer, it is your entitled duty in a startup to fire yourself as a software engineer who just cares about code and pull requests and trying to get things done fast and automated, from stepping away from that isolated box to becoming someone who's more focused around customers, business, and traction of the business. Because in the end, good code is only as good as a company, right? You never see good code from a bad company. Think about it, right? There might be thousands of companies who've had beautiful engineering written within them, but no one could ever get to experience it because the companies never took off because their priorities were different. So that is very careful. You need to think of that very carefully. Another thing I can say, an example with this entire perspective, is the concept of choosing a certain technology stack. I see devs, sometimes I work with client sites, where they get so focused and flustered around folder structures and this and that. Whilst folder structures is important for the concept of scalability and what the value you're providing to the customer, in the end, it is not important because your opinion of what is comfortable for you and what is not comfortable for you. That is not what a decision is. So the best technology, if you're building a startup, is the technology that you know. The best environment to work is the environment that you know how to work in. So do not choose the latest, shiniest tools to build your startup, because that is not, you are literally running against time and money to build a product that will succeed. So none of these things matter. It does not, customers do not care if you build this in React, Vue, Node, Python, Django, Alex. No one gives a shit. You need to realize no customer actually cares about the technology behind this. They care about the problem you're solving for them, and how you solve it for them is what matters. So use the tool that you're happy with. It hurts me a lot saying this, considering a lot of people like, oh, I'm going to use all these, technologies that are outdated. Sure, do that. But if you're comfortable with it, fantastic. And you need to consider the fact that not just you being comfortable with it is important. The business decision as a product engineer for you to think about is, okay, I'm going to use a really outdated technology because I'm very comfortable with it, but I need to hire a new developer. How easy is it going to be for me to hire a developer in this technology? It will not be easy. So the better option for me to actually learn something that might be not the latest skill set, the next best thing to the skill set I know, so that I'm not upskilling myself too much and there's too much like brain absorption, but I'm learning just enough so that it will be right for my business to attract new customers, and therefore attract new developers, and therefore help the customer in the end. So everything around the customer. And trust me, if you follow these things, it'll be extremely useful for you to grow and succeed and just rocket yourself up to the top of any startup that you're working with. So hopefully this helped, and I'd love to hear from you in the comments below as to what you have to say, because this is a very quote-unquote controversial topic, but I did write an article about this on dev.to. Check it out. I don't know why I'm pointing here. The link will be somewhere here, or if not, in the descriptions. Check it out, because I've reflected exactly the same thoughts on that post as well, and I'd love to hear from you in the comments. Smash the like button if you like it. I will look forward to hearing from you soon. Have a good day.